Hey, and welcome to the video version of our Atlanta Voiceover Studio and ProVoiceOverTraining.com podcast. This one is with Stephen Goard. Heidi will introduce Stephen, but let me tell you what they end up talking about. Why create your own content as a voiceover actor? How creating your own content can help in your voiceover career. The challenges of creating your own animation. What Stephen has learned through the process, and a whole lot more. Let's jump right in. Here's Heidi and Stephen.
So excited to have Stephen Goard here. Or as Mike calls him, Go Hard. Because he goes hard in his voiceover career. He is with CESD in New York, LA. And at the start of 2024, so just a year ago, he made the move to full-time voiceover. And you'll see why, because, he's voiced national commercials for Cheerios, Gatorade, Hanes, CDC, Pfizer, Moderna, Mike's Hard Lemonade, Principal Financial, and so many more. Plus, he does a lot of promos for NBA, NHL, ESPN, and Fox Sports. And he's also narrated documentaries for ID Discovery, the voice of Lem for Starry Soda by Pepsi, and Kang the Conqueror for Marvel Heroes Unite on the Australia Disney Wonder Cruise. And the reason why I wanted to have Stephen on the podcast today is because we had him for our Give and Learn in 2024. So just this past December, and he was on the panelist. But there is so much to talk to Stephen about. We talked a lot about like making the move from part-time voiceover to full-time. And we did not even get a chance to talk about something that I really wanted to talk about. So that's why I said, Stephen, please come on the podcast, because that way we can dive deeper.
Absolutely.
And what that is you have created your own animation, and in a really short time too. When I was looking at some of the dates don't stay in my mind. So then when I went back and I was like, whoa, this is like really like he did this isn't like, you just started in 2000 and it's just coming to be. It's relatively new, and it's so great. So it's called the UPTOWN Chronicles.
Yes.
So I did want to talk about that. But first, for people that weren't at Give and Learn, can you kind of give us a little bit of your history into voiceover?
Absolutely. Well, again, first, let me say thank you for having me. I am truly, truly, truly grateful and appreciative for the opportunity to come talk to you. One, because this is a full 360 moment for me now, and I tell people this all the time. When I really got serious about my voice acting career, I would listen to the AVS podcast religiously in the car, when I was walking, when I was, doing my little walking meditations or running or in the gym. It was trying to figure out where to start. And you guys had so many wonderful guests on and gave so much information. So thank you for having me. It feels very much like a full 360 moment just to be here. So
Yeah, of course. We love that. That's awesome, Stephen.
yeah, man. So, honestly, I signed to my first voice acting agency in 2013, and that was Houghton Talent here in Atlanta. My wonderful agent, Sally Neal.
Yeah.
Yes, she invited me to come. And it was funny because I had a self-produced demo that I had sent to a guy in Chicago. Well, matter of fact, a friend of my mother's heard it. And she's like, oh, well, you sound pretty good. Let me put you in contact with this guy that I know. He was a producer that worked at CRC Studios in Chicago. And so I sent it to him. He heard it. And he's like, yeah, you got something, but let me see if you're serious. I want you to fly out here, come talk to me, and then we'll go from there. So I flew out as promised. And, I had to call my mom and ask her for a couple dollars to get on the plane. It was a little tight, but I got out there, and from the time that he threw me in the booth cold, and I didn't flinch, and he was like, "Okay, I'm impressed. I tell you what, take these scripts. I want you to go," and he sent me to a few websites, a few things he wanted me to kind of go over, and he said, "Come back out 2 weeks. I'm going to help you produce your first demo." And that's what
Wow.
he did. He kept his word. I kept mine. I was back, and we knocked it out. So that was my first demo that was done. That was in 2012, and it was towards the end of 2012. But, we shopped it out to maybe 2 places, the People Store and Houghton Talent. And they bit first, and Sally was like, "Have you sent that to anybody else?" And I said, "Well, this one other, okay, have they called you yet?" "No."
Yeah.
"Okay, don't talk to anybody. Come talk to me." And I said, okay. So I went, and the same day I went to go talk to Sally, I signed with him. And,
Oh.
it was an interesting journey, man, because, again, 2013, this was before COVID. I had, at that particular time, I had my daughter, and, I was married before, and, a lot of things going on in life. And so, I booked my very first commercial coming out the gate. It was a Publix radio spot. Yeah, I was feeling nice and high on the
Oh,
tide
yeah.
over thinking, okay, now I'm in the right place. Let's go. And I kept auditioning. Now, mind you, I recorded that audition in a professional studio, not my own studio.
Mhm.
And I do come from kind of a background of audio engineering and production and things like that, but I didn't have my full-fledged studio that I had at that time. So I was
Mm.
doing a lot of my auditions in the middle of my living room
Oh,
with no sound treatment and
right.
no proper booth. And so that after booking the first commercial, I didn't book anything else. I mean, it was literally about
Mm.
6 years that I didn't book anything. And I couldn't figure out why. And
Yeah.
that was one of the reasons, but the other reason was the lack of real training.
Yeah.
I was going off of the raw kind of desire to become a voice actor. And of course, I let life do what it does. Life's.
Lifes. Yeah.
So
It sure
uh,
does.
I got distracted and I didn't truly pursue it. You know, I kept dipping my
Mhm.
toe in the water and just saying I wanted to become one, but I would allow things to distract me and trying to be, I was full time at that time, a web developer and a graphic designer. You know, it was an interesting journey. I'm grateful for all the things that I learned during that time, though, because it really boiled down to the determination that I would need to have to really pursue it as a career.
Mm.
And so after making a decision to say, hey, now, mind you, I think COVID around 2020, 2021. And, a lot of us were kind of in that mode of trying to figure out what to do because we're all stuck in the house. And it was a time where I did tell myself, "Well, I've got the time on my hands. Let me see if I really hone in and focus. So one of the things that I did was I moved my studio and I began to reach out to some of my friends and colleagues who I knew were actually voice actors as well. And they put me in contact with a few folks that really helped me to find my voice. And I think
Mhm.
that was the first real lesson in becoming a voice actor is to be authentically you and appreciate what you can bring because there's room for everyone. And when I really started to embrace that message, that's really where the turning point was.
Mm.
I began to become very serious about the training and the setup that I had. So I moved in my studio into my closet. So that was my first official booth was in the closet. And from there, I just began to audition. I used the pay to play sites to kind of hone my chops. And there were a few out there. And then I kind of just picked one. And Voices for me, voices.com was the one that I began to work with. And I hammered away audition after audition, trying to refine, trying to find myself and find my voice. And I booked towards the end of the year, I think it may have been 2022. I kind of booked the first one. And it was so funny because it was actually a director's cut. So it wasn't anything that was going to air anywhere, but it
Right.
still gave me an opportunity to work with a producer to get that feedback. It was such an invigorating experience because I had never really had to work one-on-one with someone before to
Mm.
produce, something.
Yeah.
I really remember that so vividly. He was such a nice guy, and so he
Mm.
sent me the cut, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is it. So I began to continue to train, and then I found my mentor. Paul
Mhm.
Liberty was my mentor, and he was the person who really believed in me. And I
Yeah.
can't say enough for what that really means. If you can find a mentor or work
Mhm.
with someone who's willing to, if they see that passion in you and can just give you the little bit of guidance, and sometimes it's just trying to find your way, but they
Yeah.
rely on you to be you, and that's what I'm a dad. I've got 5
Mhm.
children. I've been married to my wife for 8 years now, and this is who I am. I'm
Yeah.
a previous, rapper, producer. Leaning into all of those things, was really what he helped me to embrace, and that's when I feel like the real shift happened. I've also worked with some very talented coaches. Chris Grant, Aurelia Michaels were also very pivotal in my career and
Mhm.
helping me to embrace the authentic me.
Yeah.
But yeah, from there, I just began to audition. I worked on my demo after working with Paul maybe for about 4 months. He said that he felt I was ready, so we produced the demo. And yeah, I ended up probably somewhere around right after I produced the demo. Maybe it was around May, and I ended up kind of doing a trial with CESD. I met with Billy and Anita, and they were like, we love what we heard. We'd love for you to sign up with us. And I never forget that conversation because I told them I said thank you so much. Do you mind if I just talk to my wife? Because it's so funny. I think about it now because it's like they chuckled, and they're like, "Of course, of course, of course." And I
Yeah.
told one of my coaches, Chris, and I'm like, "Chris, CESD said they want to sign me." But he said, "Well, what did you say?" I said, "I told him I wanted to talk to my wife." He said, "Well, if you don't call him back, tell him." But I was so grateful, and I called him back the next day, and I just it's been a love match ever since. I
Mm.
really feel like CESD is home.
Yeah.
I love all my agents, and I'm just grateful. They've just been such instrumental pieces of honing myself and my craft, and trying to find that success of being me. So
Mm.
yeah, that's kind of the short and skinny of the journey, and I've been
Yeah.
ever since. I literally just last year signed after being. So what's funny is sometimes you do a trial with
Yep.
companies. I didn't realize it. I thought I was with them after having the conversation, but I hadn't signed any actual paperwork. You know, and then found out like later that year, like, oh, well, you're not quite official yet. But after having booked a few things in that December of that same year, I ended up flying out to New York, and I sat down with Billy, took me out to lunch, and I signed with them officially. And they generally do like a year and a half. And after about that time, then, I think it's like 3 years, 3 years, 3 years. And so last year, I actually signed my 3-year contract, and I am just feeling very grateful to have them in my corner, and
Yeah.
I've got some other wonderful agencies that I work with, but CESD is absolutely my
Yeah. Congrats.
thank you.
Congrats, Stephen. Okay, let's talk about the Uptown Chronicles.
Yes, yes.
So, first of all, just a brief summary of it, but it's an animation that you wrote, created, cast, all the things. How did it I know that there's other people that are involved, and we will totally get to that.
Absolutely.
But what motivated you to do it in the first place?
Honestly, it was really about the first major motivation. Mind you, it was around my birthday in 2 years ago. So that was 23. That, I was like, I always look at my family as this like anchor of sanity, and also a little bit of insanity at the same time, because there's so much going on in the house, but
Yeah.
it's kind of that beautiful chaos of having a lot of
As a
children.
reminder, he has 5 kids. That's what he said.
The
So,
full
yes.
range, the
Yes.
full range. My
Yes.
oldest is 21, my
Yeah.
second oldest is 20, and then I have a 16-year-old, and then we have a soon to be 6 and soon to be 8-year-old, as of January and February of this year. So it's very interesting. But yeah, so I often say it is a show in this house, and there's always so much laughter, and there's a lot of love, and of course there's always the transition of growth, that with that comes, so many other things. It also was about creating an opportunity for myself, because one of the things that I've always been taught to do is not to necessarily wait for someone to give you something. And animation has been one of those areas that I really wanted to make a name for myself. But while I'm trying to, chase those opportunities, I'm like, what better way to showcase what I can do would be to create my own animation.
Mm.
Where do I start? So yeah, I began to just write my ideas down. What do I love to watch? And one of those shows that for me was a childhood kind of, just everyone watched it, but for me it really just cemented a part of what I look back on as a big part of my childhood, which was the Cosby Show. And
Mm.
they had a big family, and I think a lot about how Bill would operate with all his children and trying to just be a great dad, and leaning into that, trying to be a great husband and leaning into that. What would that look like? And then what are some other shows that I love? So I love the Boondocks. And then, of course, I love Black Panther. And I thought that was one of the
Yeah.
most like influential films in our culture of
Mm.
media, and what that did for showcasing Black families and Black culture, and how they embraced it and melded that with technology.
Mhm.
So, and I'm thinking like, we're on this precipice of AI, and everyone is scared, especially in the voice acting industry, and
Sure.
trying to figure out how does that assimilate with where we're going to go. So let's do this. Let's just smash all of those together. What would that look like?
Yeah.
And that's where the idea was born.
Wow.
I came up with these versions of my children and my wife and myself. And so literally these are caricatures of all of us, and of course I play the dad. So that's a very easy role for me to slip into. And
Right.
yeah, I found what's so funny is I woke up after coming up with the idea. I wrote the initial script, which in a way was more of an outline, because I'm not a natural script writer, but I am a writer just from my history of writing
You're a
rhymes.
rap.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
but I had to get the idea out. So that's what it was about. It was just I wrote all the background dynamics between all the characters, and the relationships, like those things popped out to me so vividly, because again I was just leaning on kind of the stories of my family and what I've seen my kids go through, and growth, and myself as a dad. It was very easy to tap into that part, but I knew it needed to be refined. So the first person that I actually ended up reaching out to, though, was actually a childhood friend of mine, and really more family, because back then he was what I call the OG. He was the older guy, and we were running behind him trying to be like him, and he was a rapper. And his name is Patrick King, and he was actually the cousin of my best friend in Chicago. And I reached out to, but he can draw. He has Marvel level drawing ability, like
Wow.
so crazy. So I woke up at 2:30 in the morning, and this is out of a dream. And I literally was like, I have to text him. He's the one I need to call to draw these characters that are in my head.
Wow.
I had these AI versions because I had been playing with AI to try and figure out, what do they look like? I knew what I wanted them to look like. I would put these descriptions in. And when I finally got the characters, the 7 characters I wanted, and then I like, we need an antagonist. What does this look like? So I had the full cast already like created with these renderings, right? And I had the ideas, the background with the characters and all of that. And so I got on the phone with, my friend, man. And I said, listen, man, I've got an idea about this series that I want to create. At the time, I didn't know if I wanted it to be a movie or a series. I just knew I needed to get it out there.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm all ears. And so I'm at the car shop I talked to Zero for about 2 hours. And he's like, man, I am all in. He jumped at the opportunity to use his skills to create these renderings. I needed them to be original to the series, like nothing we had even seen. So I'm like, yeah, man, The Cosby Show, The Boondocks, and Black Panther. Go. Easy to make something for me. And
Yeah.
when I tell you what he brought back, I was like, oh my God, this is it. I just knew it. It wasn't even a few iterations like, no, you're almost there. Like, no, the first time. And I guess I hope that because I had given him so much background, it's a part of what helped to make it easy. But yeah, what he brought back was just amazing. And I was floored, and it just lit that fire. So I'm like, okay, next we got to get the right script for this. And so I'm like, what do I do? It was really just putting it out to the universe because I really didn't know where to go with any of this stuff, So I'm just like, one piece down. I have the characters drawn, I have a good concept. I have the background to the characters. What next? I need a good script. This that I have here is not cutting it, but it's an idea.
Yeah.
And then, it just so happens that my next door neighbor, I was talking to him, of course, I'm one of those people when I get excited about something, I cannot shut my mouth. And so I told everyone that was close to me, not everyone, because you can't share so much that you give the idea
Right,
away.
right.
But, my next door neighbor, Donnie, he's a confidant, a great person. And I told him, I have this idea. I need to get the script written. I have a starter script, but, he said, you know what? I know this guy. His name is Alonje Hawes, and he used to be in the service with me. Matter of fact, he was his sergeant. He was the person that signed him to get into the service. So I'm like, yeah, I would love, he's like, yeah, he's written several web episodes and a few TV series episodes. And, he's a really talented guy. I said, well, reach out to him, see if he might be interested. Funny enough, hearing it now too, when he tells the story, it's very interesting because, of course he's heard that before. He's a very talented writer, very, very talented writer. And so, your skills are in demand when you are. And, so he's heard that before. Oh, I've got a great idea. I've got a script. I really need you to, so I think he was like, yeah. Okay. But then he heard it was an animation. He was like, well, that's different. I haven't done that before. That was something that I think was on his list of to-dos. And so it was, serendipity. It was just really a synchronistic kind of meeting of minds. And so he introduced us, reached out to him, invited him to come over to the studio. We sat down, I laid it all out for him, and I gave him my whole spiel about, what I was envisioning and how I had these characters in my head. And he was on board from there. And
Wow.
it just felt like it's just been history.
Yeah.
We've made a lot of progress, since then. And we've produced a trailer. We are in the midst of trying to get the series picked up, by a major network or a production house who can really see the vision of what it is that I'm hoping to really create and cement and, as a legacy to animation and just something that's different from what we've seen. For me, I just don't think we have a lot of shows that showcase not only families, but especially African American families with dynamics that are cohesive and dynamics that really
Right.
embrace togetherness. We just
Yes.
don't have a lot of that, especially in animation. So yeah, that's kind of where it was born from. And
Yeah.
it's certainly been a journey. We're still on it. We're very, very close to getting to that point. But, we have so many things we've created from this. We've managed to birth a comic book from it. And, it's one of those things this year we're actually doing some Comic-Con tours and
Wow.
connecting with people, looking to build a fan base. And Yeah, it's a labor of love, and I couldn't imagine spending time doing anything else because
Mm,
again, I'm excited to be able to get behind the mic and even it's given me a different appreciation for what I do as a professional voice actor
mm,
because the casting side of things, it's eye-opening. We received a ton of auditions for a few. We received a ton of auditions in general, but there were a few characters that seemed to have gotten more auditions than others. Our antagonist and the
mhm,
mom, we had a
mm,
ton of people who wanted to audition for the mom and the antagonist, and so, but it was great, man. It's
mm.
a journey, which of course, we're still on it, but I derive so much joy from just watching it develop. I'm a fan as much as a part of being a creator of the series.
Sure.
Yeah.
What was something that you learned from the process that you have implemented into your own VO career?
Honestly, it's the patience that it takes in knowing that, a production is so much more than just about you as a voice actor. When you're trying to find the right voice for something, it becomes more than just about the voice. It's how they embody the characteristics naturally for the character, how they understand the background for the characters. And, knowing that, you're one small piece of an entire production that is at the end of the day going to be shown to represent a brand and the messaging that they're trying to put out there to the world. If you can take a moment to just soak in how many people are involved, then really just doing the best that you can and being you for what you're going to bring to that character and really truly just trying to connect with what that character is going to be, especially with animation. Animation is a little bit different from commercial, but the same, elements of collaborative and, just co-working creativity is there.
Mm,
And you're a very integral but small piece of a larger story that's being told. So it's really given me a great appreciation for us as voice actors and how we feel when we don't get feedback. Or I even had people reach out to me and say, "Hey, did you get my audition?" It's one of those things where it's just like I heard early on in my voice acting career, like you don't reach out to production if you haven't heard anything to say, "Hey, did I get?" But again, being on the other side, I get it. So I really do have a different appreciation for that process. Yeah, it was we spent a whole day going through hundreds of auditions, and yeah, it was eye-opening, but it's definitely given
mhm.
me an appreciation of the process of casting,
Yeah.
what that feels like and what that looks like from both sides.
Mhm.
So, when I approach what I do, I just go in and give the best version of what I feel it is, and I try to give the best performance. I try to study. I do research before I do my auditions. I go out, find links, or I find characters or people who've done things similar, and just find my own voice within the realm of what could possibly be, and then you let it go because there's no telling why someone gets cast for something.
Right.
But yeah, I have a whole new level of appreciation for that
Mm.
entire process, so that's
'Cause you
that's
could probably see on your end how you're, like, listening to these auditions and you're like, "Those are good auditions."
yeah,
Like, there's nothing wrong with that audition, it just wasn't the
was it?
character that we're looking for. It just wasn't a match. It
Yeah,
wasn't anything that they did wrong.
yeah, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely, and it's like a knowing, so when you hear it, you know it, and I think that's
Mm,
what it's like for so many of these producers and creators, and yeah, for example, one of the things with the mother with this series is that Claire Huxtable had a very, very interesting way of being a mom. She
mhm.
had the strength,
Yeah.
she had that little
She's
sass when
had
it
a
was
little sass.
necessary,
I
you
loved
know,
her sass.
but
Yeah.
but it was like, but you always felt the love. You
Yeah.
didn't feel like she had an attitude or she was mad. And I say this a lot too. I think so many of the stereotypes is what I'm hoping that the series can break. I think especially African American women have this stereotype of being attitudinal when it
Mm.
comes to being moms or having to be, just the head. And it's just like, there is always a place for everything in the world, but this mother needs to embody that it's a strength. It's not a silent strength. Like she doesn't speak up.
Mhm.
She has a very powerful voice, but it's still loving. You always feel the love. And so when we put the character specs out, and it was so important to make sure that that was emphasized, like we want to make sure that we feel the love from the mom, but that she has that strength and that she has that, that entrepreneurial aspect of who she is. And she is a strong woman, but it comes through without it having to be forceful. So many of the auditions that we got were just exactly that. It was like you can hear it as soon as they, and it was funny because the
Mm.
dialogue was written in a way where if you really couldn't embody that, it was easy to fall into the attitudinal part.
Yeah.
I give you one example was a scene where she's talking to the husband and she's like, "Dre, get those kids to school, Dre." And you know, there's so many different ways you can say that, right?
Sure.
But yeah, it was like when we heard the actress that we found and she delivered it, we knew. Like we both looked at each other, it was like,
Mm,
that's it. That's it. And so there was nothing wrong with the other auditions. I thought a lot of those auditions did capture in different moments, but it was all the way through. You felt the love no matter where she was at in her
mm,
cadence. And yeah, so it was like that for the villain and for the kids. Oh, and my gosh, do we have some so talented young people who have, oh God, I'm so excited to introduce the young. I wanted to find real children to do the
yeah.
two little ones, as opposed to adults who can do kid voices. I mean, you can find them, but these two little ones are just, just so. The word I'm looking for is just magnificent, spectacular. So many, because you can feel the personalities come through, the
Mm,
excitement they had. And yeah, I was, it was like we knew, especially for the young one, Kira, who's our
yeah.
young girl in the series. We had two, and it was so tough. That was a tough
Mm.
decision because the two young ladies that we had to audition for, oh, they were so good. They were so good. One of them, though, had this personality. It was like, she's going to be on Broadway somewhere. It was just like, you can't deny. I mean, even in the audition, I think the young man that we had playing Jordan, who's the little kid in the series, in the audition, he had a moment where, I think he flubbed. And so he felt a little bit, kind of like, I don't want to say embarrassed, but he was a kid. And so he's trying this. I think this is his first major kind of audition. And the young lady jumped in and she said, you got this. I'm like, this is in the audition because we let them two audition together. She's like, you got this. You just saw it come out. She's like, you can do this. You have it. And we just looked at each other and we were like, oh my God,
Yeah.
my heart right now can't take all this just lovely
Wow.
energy. But yeah, it was a beautiful experience. And so, I'm so excited to just bring this to the world. And I can't wait until we can get in the studio and record. Of
Mhm.
course, that's the fun part for me. But all of it's just an eye-opening experience from start to finish.
Yeah.
Casting and the soundtrack, the production. Of course, I have a little bit of a musical background, so even that part was exciting for me. And getting to choose, the tracks for the series and the trailer and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah. I want to talk more about the music, but really quick, I want to go back to the mom auditions because I think
yeah,
something you said was eye-opening, I think, for me of do Black women especially, do
yeah.
they feel like they have to give auditions based on like what they think other people expect
You know,
from, like,
it's tough because and for me, of course I'm married to a strong Black woman.
yeah.
I am married to someone who I believe is very spiritually connected. That was another very integral piece of this, character that we wanted to come through, her connection to her ancestry and her connection to the ancestors and how that plays into her mothering her children.
Mm,
But, of course, I'm not a Black woman, so I can't speak to how they
right.
feel, but I know that relationships that I've had, I've seen various ways in which there's been expressions of strength and also expressions of what they feel is kind of what the world kind of corners them into when it comes
Mm,
to how they have to interact with the world because of all. Listen, my wife works in IT. And this is a great example. And she works at a very high level in IT. That is not a normal place for a young Black woman to be. So
mm,
she is the only Black woman in a place that is mainly white males.
yeah.
And her having to have her voice heard because her knowledge is there. Her ability to know and execute is that obviously it is because she wouldn't have made it that high. Her higher ups are the president and vice president. You know,
Wow.
so when it comes to when something goes wrong and they're looking for accountability, she's the person that one of the people that they're going to come to. But having to fight to be heard is something that I know that African American women for so
Mm,
long have gone through, and that's something that takes a lot of strength to persevere through and become successful in
mhm,
and make a name for yourself. So for me, that was one of the things again that I wanted to come through with this character. She's got the motherly aspect, she's got the entrepreneurial aspect to her and what it takes to move forward, but she's got a connection to family, she's got a connection to history.
yeah.
All of those things are so important. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's something that all African American women go through, but I do know that for me, I wanted that strength in that story of strength to be told in a way that gave respect to
Yeah.
their stories.
And there's so many layers to it. It's not just some little box,
No,
that yeah, that's really cool, Stephen.
I'm
Well,
grateful.
let's talk about some of the aspects of creating the animation, like music.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So, how did you, I mean, because Guys, if you listen, we'll put a link to the website for
Yeah.
Uptown Chronicles, and you can go and watch the trailer there. And the music is fantastic. I mean, it's like so professional. So how did that come about?
Well, I was very excited about that part of it, mainly because it was kind of, in the realm of, being a music producer and being someone who's always kind of been behind the boards and enjoyed that creative aspect of producing. It was a collaborative process though. My writer and I, and, Alange is my right-hand man with this. He not only is he the writer for the series, but he's my co-producer and he's also an executive producer and co-director, so we're really in the trenches together on this. And, we work very, it's interesting because I've always been, easy to work with. I feel like I'd like to think I have been, but you never know. But he and I have his dad is actually, rest in peace. His father's not with us anymore, but his dad was from Chicago as well. And he would often tell me,
Mm.
like, I remind him a little bit of his dad in certain instances, just my cadence and how I kind of articulate certain things and the ways that I think. But, we connected and it's been a very collaborative process, but it was, interesting trying to figure out all the pieces because I honestly feel like, I'm feeling my way through, intrinsically what goes into it. But as you get into the nuts and bolts of everything, you kind of figure out, okay, so we have the script, we had to find our animator, we have the drawings, we have all the caricatures, and now we have to find someone who can actually bring it to life on screen. That was actually the very next piece, and we ended up linking up with an African American animator who lives in France, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yes, he is an amazing animator. Now, I will say this, again, in light of this series wanting to embrace, us being on the precipice of this new age of technology, I wanted to utilize as many tools that are in that realm as possible. So, Unreal Engine is a new way in which movie studios, even Hollywood movie studios, are utilizing that in major motion pictures.
Hmm.
And I began to see how it kind of shortened the pipeline for bringing things to life as well, with all the assets that they have out there that you can kind of take and then manipulate to be, what you need it to be.
Hmm.
And that gave us a great advantage in kind of speeding up the time that we were able to get our trailer done. But he was somebody that I reached out to, and even that's kind of a serendipitous meeting. But I'll shorten it and say that I reached out to him early on before we had a trailer, and I planted the seed of the idea. And also in light of not waiting on someone to do it, because I spoke with some big production houses, and of course all of this is being funded from my pocket as of right now, but I have linked with some great people who have showed me ways to monetize this, and so we're
Mm.
able to kind of put back into it. But before then, yeah, so trying to figure out how to get this out there and do it in a way where it wasn't killing my pockets. I would do my best to kind of try and figure out, okay, well, where do we go from here? And with our animator, once I reached out to him. I said, I'm not going to wait around. I'm going to do my best with what I have. So I created the very first trailer, and it was maybe like, 10, 15 seconds. I voiced it. I took some AI tools and I clipped some things together, did a little bit of editing and put it out there. And I'm like, this is the concept. And I used our 2D art. This is our concept for what we're doing. And 2 weeks later, the same guy that I had reached out to that said he was interested, he saw what I had put out. And he's like, you know what? I'd love to be involved with that. And it just so happens that he had experience with Unreal Engine. And I
Wow.
had seen a few pieces that he had produced, which is what made me initially reach out to him. And so I was so
Uh-huh.
grateful. And he's like, yeah, I'd love to be involved with this.
Wow.
How can I be down? So
Wow.
yeah, and so we brought Dom on. Alonja and I got together with Dom and we met, and he's like, I really like him, and he's black. He's black. Yeah, so
Aw.
it was such a come to truth moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we began to work on it. And then from there, of course, as it's getting produced and we're going back and forth with the creative, we knew we needed the music. We kind of had the first renderings. And once we had the first renderings and, kind of saw how it was coming to life, and then that's when I began to craft some of the music. And Alonja and I would talk about it, and I would just go in and, we found some free music, and then we added some things to it, and then we just kind of put it together. And yeah,
Wow.
it's been an amazing, amazing experience. But one of the things that I learned from some of the people, even in voiceover, when you're trying to do projects of this nature, you don't wait. You don't have to wait for the big boxes to give you permission to do it, but work sideways. you are connected with people who are creative and passionate. You never know who in your circle. And even my mentor, when it came to trying to cast for voice acting, I wrote the initial antagonist role for Keith David, and he was in my mind. He was the anchor in my mind for that antagonist the whole
Wow.
time. But of course, when I reached out to Keith in his representation, he was busy at the time because he's a very busy man. But it was worth a shot. But what it did was it let me know, it was kind of the first way of figuring out, okay, you may have aspirations to work with someone of that caliber, and you will one day, but you may find someone who is just as good.
Mhm.
And I let my mentor Paul kind of see what we had, and he was like, "Oh, this is beautiful, Stephen. Let me tell you one thing you need to do: find some actors near you. Work with people in Atlanta.
Mm.
You have people around you. Reach out to these people." You're right, Paul. And from there,
Mhm.
that's exactly what I did. So that's how we began. We did a
Wow.
casting that was an open casting, and then I actually utilized CESD, my agency.
Nice.
They were integral in helping us to find a few of the actors that we have who are very major in the series. And
Mm.
I'm so grateful because they've been very supportive of the series just as much as they have of me being a voice actor. And that's why I said it feels like home working with them.
Yeah,
They care
totally.
on so many levels. But yeah, we pulled it all together and we produced the trailer. Web development is kind of my background. So building the site was
And the site looks great. So
thank
you can tell that that's your background. Looks great.
and I also have some other collaborators who I've been working with for a while, just on the back end, and they help us with social media. I've got a financial analyst who kind of helps us to formulate the deals from a film perspective,
Mhm.
and now we have an operations manager, so to speak, and he helps us to really get and hone in on how to kind of structure our moves in a way where the end result will be exactly what we're hoping for
Mm.
for this to
Let
hit
me
screen.
ask you about the trailer because one thing that I have done in the past, and not many people probably know this, but I created a whole pilot TV show and I went and pitched it to
I saw
a
it.
big
You
a
played
big conference. But man, I spent $11,000 of my own money to create this whole little pilot, and it was a huge endeavor. And when I got up there to pitch it to the networks, all of the networks were like, Heidi, you could have just written this idea on a piece of paper and
yeah,
handed it to us.
yeah.
And I was like, shoot. That was a huge learning lesson of like, oh, I just needed like a simple concept. So when I saw that you just did the trailer, I was like, that is really smart. And I think you probably got some really good advice somewhere from someone
Yeah.
on that. So how'd that happen?
To be honest with you, it wasn't so much that I got advice on doing the trailer. I wanted to be different. I've
Mm,
kind of always felt like, I don't want to necessarily, I wasn't an outcast, but I never was a part of like the cool kid crowds. I wasn't like an athlete or specific, now I was into sports or, I had friends, I was friends with people that everybody else wasn't necessarily friends with. And, they would, but then I can be friends with the cool kids and then the kind of the off kids or
yeah.
whatever. And so it was like I always felt like I kind of had to create my own thing. And so I wanted to be different, but I also wanted a way where we can find ways to gain some recognition for it to just help validate the idea.
Hmm.
So one of the ways in which I thought to do that would be to create a trailer as opposed to creating like a whole, first episode and
Yeah.
having it be so expensive. Now, mind you, creating this trailer was no small endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was very costly, from the casting to the animation to the sound and, the engineers and things that I work with. But with all that being said, it really just boiled down to trying to find a creative way to get the idea out there. But the trailer also allowed us to actually submit it to film festivals, which is one of the goals that we wanted to do. And we ended up winning 3 awards the very first time for the very first 3 festivals that we submitted in, we won them. And so
Amazing.
for me, it was kind of a validation of the fact that we're in the right place,
Hmm.
kind of making the right moves. And that's really what it was about. It was like, okay, there's several different ways we can go about this, but I think a trailer will help people to really understand where we're trying to go with this without giving too much away.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was really the idea behind creating the trailer.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
great. What are some of the biggest things that you've learned as you've started to pitch Uptown Chronicles to
oh
people?
gosh, yeah, that it's a lengthy process.
That
There's
it's not easy?
No, and as much as I believe very much in manifestation and being clear, clarity I think is an important piece of whatever you're trying to bring about. You know what I mean? And I think just knowing that you have to be patient with the process, but
Mm,
even as I've continued to collaborate with people and expand our team, having a plan, but having not just a short-term plan, but a long-term plan. So we have a 5-year plan for the realization of this series. We know that it'll happen before then, but we're not going to wait. So we have ways in which we're going to have steps that we're specifically going to take to ensure the success. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's just like, there is no overnight success or what people consider to be overnight. It just looks like that
Yeah.
because a lot of times you've put so much work on the background, and by the time it comes out and people realize how much you've put into it, it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like, oh wow, this is just so cool. But no, it's because as I look back, it's like now I started this in what 2023 August. So now we're in 2025.
Mm,
I had a goal of trying to get the series first episode produced May of last year, but we're still here. But
yeah.
with that being said, that doesn't mean it won't still happen very soon. But in the meantime, we have very specific steps that we're taking to ensure that this will become an actualized series. And
Mhm.
that's what's exciting. So, it's just knowing that your future is not in the hands of someone giving you anything. It's just about creating those opportunities for yourself. And for me, that's really been the messaging along the way. Create those opportunities for yourself. Find ways that you can continue to have movement because it really is just 1% every day. And you're going to look up and soon 1% adds up. I read this book one day that was talking about compound interest. And that's really truly how life works. Because when you compound 1 penny, but you continue to compound that 1 penny, you really don't see it actualize into that million, probably until about year 5 or 6. And you looked up after you've continued to compound, then it's like, oh, wow, now I have something that feels much heavier than it did when I first began.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely enjoying the journey and loving the journey that allows me to focus more on the work and less on just the end result. Because when you are creating, for me, creating is a happy place. But even more so, creating in a way that inspires people is even more in line with my life's mission. So that's what I'm anchored in, and that's what I hold on to as we're going through this process.
I love it. There's so many other questions, but I can't imagine a better place to end this podcast on than that. So we will just keep them wanting more.
I- Thank you.
But thank you so much, Stephen, for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it and sharing all this. And we're just here to cheer you along the way and support and do whatever we can. So,
Thank you. Thank you
yeah.
for having me. Thank you for doing what you guys do. You continue to be a very pivotal part of this industry and just pillars of caring and education. And, I don't think the voice acting industry would be what it is without you and Mike. So thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Atlanta Voiceover Studio and ProVoiceOverTraining.com are here to equip, elevate, and inspire you in your voiceover journey, giving you the tools and resources you need to create the voiceover career you want. Remember, you're building a voiceover business. Think outside the box. Cheers to your success.